If you're not reinventing yourself every 6 months, you're either going to become the bottleneck of the company or you might be looking for a new job.
Is there a single thread that connects that excellent entrepreneur at every single different stage?
This is a legacy play. Go big or go home.
My guest today is Mike Del Ponte. He's a 3-time founder, including of Soma Water, but his real passion and focus is on coaching some of the world's best startup founders. If you care about improving yourself individually as a means to improving the performance of your company, this is the episode for you. We dig into the values, culture, resource investment and allocation, decision centers of intelligence, and so much more. I'm Adam Spector, a 4-time founder, an investor in 200 plus startups, and of course, CEO of Chore. We help founders outsource operations so they have more time and more resources to focus on building their entrepreneurial dreams. Come join me on this conversation. Let's dive in. Welcome to the next episode of Entrepreneurial Excellence. It is with great pleasure I have Mike Del Ponte with me here today, founder of Soma Water, which he sold. He's founded 2 other companies, but his real main day-to-day life and what he spends the most time on right now is coaching other founders and making sure they can build the businesses of their dreams. So he's also been an investor. So he's kind of seen it from the founder side to the coaching side. And you probably have a pretty good handle on what it means to be a quote unquote excellent entrepreneur. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And Adam, I can't remember exactly how we were introduced, but I was a customer of one of your previous companies. And I think we're both hyper optimizers.
Yes.
And I always appreciated that about you. And it's something we always talk about when we're just catching up as friends. And so I think that's how we start our friendship, is trying to optimize everything, starting with our businesses.
Totally. In our lives, in our health. And we'll talk about that a little bit too. So actually on that note, Mike, I mean, when you think about entrepreneurial excellence, how do you define that? Like, what is your definition of that?
You know, it depends on what the entrepreneur wants. I think one of the problems with Silicon Valley, most of my clients are venture-backed Silicon Valley CEOs. And a huge risk in being on Silicon Valley is that you start falling into these tropes, right? Excellent looks like Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent looks like Sam Altman. Excellent looks like Steve Jobs. That's the wrong problem.
Okay.
The right problem to solve is, what does it look like for Adam or for Mike? And what does it look like in this stage of your life? You know, I think the best thing about being a young entrepreneur is it's the most optimized way to learn. Like for me, I started my first venture-backed company when I was 28. It was like drinking out of a fire hose. That was excellent for me. 14-hour days, 7 days a week, learning as much as possible. That was excellent. For other people, like some of my clients that have families, excellent is building an impactful and successful business while also maintaining work-life balance. So we have to be very specific when defining excellence. And I would say the key word for a founder who's considering what excellence means to him or her is authenticity. What is authentically excellent to you? Once you define that, then you can, start moving towards it, whether you work with a coach or do it on your own. But that's the key thing, being authentic.
Are there any secrets to identifying the authenticity for you as an individual?
Of course, it all comes down to values. If you don't know your values, you're like walking around with your eyes covered, right? And so it's very important to get clear on your values. What do you value? And you can tell what you value by simply how you live your life.
Well, and so what does that mean? Like, imagine, so give me, use an example of some of your clients or yourself, or like, what does it mean? What do you value and how you live your life? Like for me, I enjoy spending a ton of time with my team, trying to build my company. I spend a lot of time with my family. I don't want to waste time on things like optimization. I care about not wasting time in some ways. Those are the things I care about. So are those my values or?
Yeah, it's a great start. I can tell from you value efficiency.
Sure.
Because you value time,
mm-hmm.
right? You want to make the most out of this life that we have. And so you've
time is short.
Organized your life to be very efficient.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a CEO, I had this employee. He was a VP and he had this incredible resume. I thought this guy's going to be a rock star. And he came to the company and he spent so much time working, first guy in, last guy out. And he would always complain, I'm not spending enough time with my family. I love my family so much. I want to be with my family. I need to head out of the office. It's time for me to get back to my family. And at that time, I had an executive coach. And I was telling him about this guy. I was like, hey, I can't really figure him out. He always talks about his family, but he's working so much and I feel like he's kind of spinning his wheels, like instead of going and closing deals, he's updating decks. And my coach stopped me and said, wait, he doesn't like his family. I said, wait a second. Of course he likes his family. He talks about them all the time. If he liked his family, he would spend time with them.
Yep.
He's using work as an excuse to be away from his family.
Yep. His wife and kids, like, I'm so busy. Sorry, I can't be at home. I'm so busy with work right now.
I'm doing it for you guys. I'm so sorry. My boss is cracking the whip on me. I don't know what he's telling his family. But clearly, he valued work or whatever work represented, productivity or whatever it is, being a provider, versus spending time with his family.
Yep.
Whereas if the guy was like, hey, I'm so sorry, I was biking my kids to work or to school. Hey, I'm so sorry. I got to leave early because my son has a recital. He'd probably be someone who values his family.
Mm-hmm.
So you can usually tell from the get-go on how someone's acting on what they're truly committed to. And that's very interesting and very important, especially when I'm coaching founders, because there's an important distinction between wants and commitments. We all have wants. I'm 42 years old. I want to have the body that I had when I was 22. Okay.
Actually, I would say you should have a healthier body than 20. I don't know what your body was like in 22, but like mine was probably not as healthy. I was drinking and,
Well, aesthetically, it looked a lot better.
Yeah, fair.
But guess what? I'm not committed to that.
Yeah.
I'm building my coaching business. I've got, a family. I've got all these other things that I am truly committed to. And so guess what? My body's not going to look at 42 what it looked like at 22. Even though I want it, I'm not committed to it. And so your commitments and values are usually fairly aligned, but you have to dig a little deeper because your commitments may be temporal, meaning what you're committed to now, whereas values are usually longer standing. For example, for me, I value my family, my faith. I do value health, but I don't value, my aesthetic fitness as I used to. I value adventure and I value learning. Those are some of my core values.
You and I share a lot of similar values. I now whisper in my kids' ears when I wake them up in the morning. I say, what adventures are we going to have today? I used to say, let's attack the day. And I decided that sounded a little too negative to say that. But for me, that's exciting. Like, I want to go attack the day and let's see what we're going to wrestle and go make happen. But I thought that sounded maybe too negative. So I've changed it to adventures, which is more exciting and probably more appropriate in the age of AI. I don't know. So to maybe put a heuristic around this, if that's possible, would you say that the way to figure out what you value is essentially what you spend the most time on? So that's essentially look at where you spend your time and your average week, day, month, whatever. That's probably what you value the most.
That's a great start. I would look at how you spent your time recently. Have you spent your time historically? And then if able, I'd interview some people. Like for me, when I was trying to discern my values, I sent a quick survey out to family and friends. And, where does Mike have the most energy? Where does Mike light up? What does Mike not like to do? Where do you see him kind of get frustrated? And then, of course, the answers were all the same. And that's how I got my values. And so, yeah, it just takes a quick examination. I mean, this is kind of like a Saturday morning type of thing. Journal, look at your calendar, talk to a few people. And then once you have your values, that helps define excellence, which was your first question, right? So if I'm in a stage of life where I'm valuing helping as many people as possible, it's really different than if I value spending as much time with my 2-year-old as possible.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so that's a great way to define excellence and sort of as an entrepreneur, but maybe go a little bit deeper. And what I mean there is, as an entrepreneur, you're presumably starting your business to achieve some goal. And so you have to have some value, being focused on that. How do you think through what makes for a really quote unquote great entrepreneur? Is it someone who's saying, it could be, and you might be described this way, it's someone who is I can live my values and build a great business. Is that sort of what great looks like? Or is it the person who's going to work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week to just make it happen no matter what?
Yes. So let me use an example from one of my current coaching clients, and we'll tie it back to values. So this is someone who's running a biotech company. He's very young. He's very bright. And he's clear it's all about impact. He has a technology that he believes will change a certain aspect of biotechnology. He's certain of it. He's been working on it for many years. We're doing a lot of clinicals. He has raised a lot of money. And so his value primary is changing the world. This is a legacy play. It's different than someone who says, hey, look, I don't have any money. I just want to flip this company and make 10 million bucks. That's fine. That's a different value. This guy, he's really focused on changing the world with his specific technology. Now he has some other values, family and friends, adventure. He's a mountaineer. And then he probably has some other, personal values around learning. I think he likes just educating himself, whatever, health. Okay. But his primary value as a CEO is changing the world, go big or go home.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's doing that, he's playing such a long game. This guy who is younger than most founders is more mature than most founders because his vision is so big. It's not even when people say change the world, it's like, come out with an app that's slightly better than the other app. No. This guy's literally saying 20 years from now, the way that people will heal themselves is radically different than how they heal themselves today.
Amazing.
And he's got the technology and the roadmap to do it. But because his commitment, his value is like a 50-year value, like he's imagining himself when he's like 70, what is it going to look like? And 50 and 40, right? And so that shapes everything. And the ultimate result of that is he's strategic. A lot of people say they're strategic. They're not. They're reactive. But so he's excellent because he's strategic. He doesn't make many mistakes. He's fast when he needs to, slow when he needs to. He's playing things much better than most people are. But the reason why he's able to do that is his value is anchored decades in the future as opposed to reactive to what happened yesterday.
And so you think that is maybe that a different definition or a better definition of excellence in some ways is playing that strategic long game? Or, in this way, I guess you could say Elon Musk is pretty good, right? He's like, our mission is to go to Mars. Like that is a really long game to go to Mars. Like there's a number of key steps you need to do to achieve that. And Elon Musk works incredibly hard. Is that the right way to do it? Now you could also say he probably has a terrible family life and is, from a personality perspective, not particularly great. What is the trade-off there? I mean, is this guy that you're talking about, do you see him as one of those just utter top tier founders or someone who's like, hey, like you're going to probably change the world, but maybe not. Like maybe, are you maybe moving too slow, right? 20 years from now is a long time. There's a lot of new technology that might come out. Are you moving fast enough? Where do you balance those things out when you look at not just him, but all your other people you've coached in companies you've invested in?
Yeah. And this goes back to also, how are we defining excellent? Elon Musk is an excellent CEO. Anyone who tries to tell you different is completely, dishonest or confused.
Totally.
Because of what he's accomplished. Is he an excellent human being? Is he an excellent husband and father? Probably not, right? Is he excellent in terms of how he communicates? No, right? So we have to define what we're trying to do here. If we're isolating to being a CEO, yes, his genius in physics, his ability to raise money, his ability to recruit top talent, those are things that we should probably emulate.
Yep.
But there are people, I spoke with a CEO yesterday, second time CEO, last company, worth billions of dollars. He's got a new company. He's in a different stage of life. Of course he wants to go big. Of course he wants to be successful, but he's not doing it at the risk of his family. To me, that's excellent.
What do you think? So here's a good example. What do you think it is about founders who've had multiple successes, right? A lot of the people I've had on the show are people who've had multiple successes. Are there certain things that you think, hey, like these people clearly they figured something out where even at different stages in life, they can build a successful business in their 20s when they're going to work 14-hour days, 7 days a week. And in their 30s or 40s, they have now kids, family, all these other things where they can't work that hard, but maybe they're more efficient. Is there a single thread that connects that excellent entrepreneur at every single different stage where they can keep repeating that success?
Well, I think for the people who have the same playbook, that it's a little easier. For example, the SaaS entrepreneur who does the same company over and over and over and over. Now you just have to make sure the market hasn't evolved too much. We all know that there are these founders out there and they get these 9-10 figure exits and then they recreate the same thing. If you remember Vitamin Smart Water, the guy who founded that as the CEO sold it for $4.2 billion. He started Body Armor, right? The Gatorade competitor, same playbook. Sold both of them to Coca-Cola, I'm pretty sure too, right? So if you got the same playbook, it's one thing. But there are also founders who they may fail the first one. And I'm not talking like small exit fail. People talk about the founder of Uber, his first company only sold for 30 million or whatever. I was like, okay, he had a little cash. I'm talking about people who have like flamed out, but they go and they give it a second try. Yeah. There's someone I'm thinking of, and I won't say his name publicly, but he was this guy kind of hanging out in Silicon Valley. And it was like, this guy is not really making it happen for years. And then he took a company public.
What was the
So,
difference?
well, I would say what I admire about that guy, persistence.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be willing to not give up. That's one of the key attributes. When we talk about values and commitment, the person who is committed to not lose is probably going to win over time.
Yeah, no, I
Now,
totally agree with that. By the way, I will say, like, I've been in Silicon Valley now 15 years, and the number of people that are still here from those early days when I was here is very small, a very small number. Now, it doesn't mean like they've gone and done very different things and they've had great lives. There's nothing wrong with that. I like to think, I tell myself at least, like, I've stuck with it, right? And now I'm on my fourth company and have done a lot of investing, and that persistence in kind of, I actually would call it compounding as well. Right. I'm continuously learning in a similar space. Now, I'm not building SaaS company A directly after SaaS company B and like things like that. But the same general space has enabled me to compound my learnings, compound my information, knowledge, everything else, and my network to help lead to things that will achieve better outcomes.
I have a friend. We lived in the same dorm in college, freshman year. This guy started a company in high school, web design, boring company, right? Young guy makes websites. Okay. Not that impressive. He is so successful because that was like 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. He kept doing the same thing year over year, and he's super smart, high integrity, all of that stuff. But he compounded his learnings, his network, his reputation. And now that one company, he has like 5 companies. And he's now the chairman and doing all this amazing work. And I agree. Sometimes just sticking with it is really important. Now, sometimes you want to get out of the bubble because, as I said earlier, Silicon Valley has a lot of tropes and memes, and you can fall into, I just need to do Y Combinator again. Probably not. You might need to go and look from a new vantage point. But in general, staying in the game is really helpful and really important. That persistence is key. And Adam, you've asked me a few times about excellence. So I'll give you a more straightforward answer if you want, of like more of a formula of what it means as a CEO. So I think as a CEO, especially an early stage startup, there are 3 things that are really important: vision, team, and resources.
Vision, team. Okay.
Vision is first crafting the vision in your own head. Can you see where you want to go? And when I say vision, I don't mean a mission statement. I mean, literally, can you close your eyes and it's like watching a movie and you can see the future? Mm-hmm. You have to craft the vision. You have to convey the vision to other people verbally, in written format, visually. And last thing, which most entrepreneurs skip, is you have to confirm the vision. You have to make sure that other people see the future that you see.
Yep.
And so vision is the first thing. The second is team.
How do you, pause on vision for 1 second. How do you make sure people see the vision with you? So I find there's lots of founders who might have a clear vision. They're not good at telling the story about the vision and explaining it. So what do they do to get good at that? Because to me, that's a critical element. You might have a vision, but if you can't explain your vision.
Yeah. Or maybe you can explain the vision, but it's not sinking in. If you're a founder or a leader of any kind, you might have had one of these experiences where you have a meeting. It's like you and 10 people in a conference room, and you think that you clearly articulated everything. The meeting ends, and a week later, you find out that people are on all different pages. And so how do you confirm a vision? You could just ask, hey, what did I hear? You could ask later, hey, last week we had that meeting about our top 3 priorities. What are they? And what are you working on? Mm-hmm. You can have them write something. Okay, I want everyone to leave this meeting, and I want you to tell me specifically what you're going to do that ladders up to the most important thing in the company. So there are a lot of ways that you could do this. You could also, from a high level, even survey your employees, right? At the end of the year, hey, what was our biggest win? Next year, what's the most important priority? But you have to confirm the vision. We often skip over this to our own detriment. And a lot of founders are very excellent at crafting and conveying a vision. They've got their TED Talk all done, but they don't confirm the vision. And then they wonder why their employees are like cats running in different directions. So that's a very important step.
So literally just confirming, it's just like, go ask your team, like, hey, like, what do you think we're doing?
Yeah.
Yes. Or is it also like repeating it as well? Like one thing I try to do with my company at Shore, I mean, we repeat every single month. We do an all hands every month. The very top of that all hands, I pull out a piece of our mission, vision, or values, and we talk through that every single month. There's something. And I think that helps, but I don't know. I'll admit, I don't fully know if the team fully understands the vision.
That's more on conveying the vision. That'd be the convey step. The confirm is when they actually tell you.
Okay.
And you also see it through their work, of course.
Yeah.
right? This gets back a little bit to commitments we talked about. What are people committed to? If you have a meeting, you say, hey, these are the 3 most important things for our company this quarter, and you find out your employees are doing number 4, 5, and 6, well, they didn't confirm the vision, right? And again, remember, vision is just the literal definition of vision. What do you see? So can they see where we're going and the steps to get there? That's the key.
Is there any heuristics or things you like to use to help the founders you coach get better at storytelling and explaining their vision?
Well, number one is you have to be a broken record, which is very annoying. As a founder and CEO myself, I got so frustrated. It's like, I said this 10 times.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you need to say it 10 more times. And so that's number one, is you can never say it enough. And there are ways to weave it into discussions so it doesn't sound robotic. So I don't need to say, before we start this meeting, I want to remind you that our mission is A, B, and C. Yeah. It's a little bit more like, hey, as we all know, our mission is A, B, and C. And so blah, 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 blah.
Reminder, here's our vision. And this is why we're launched this new product, because it helps further our mission.
Connect the dots. Okay. Yeah. We're on the mission to colonize Mars, which is why it's so important to get the chopsticks to catch the rocket, as you guys all know. But the key thing is that the chopsticks, there's a hydraulic that's broken, and so you're tying it in instead of just saying, hey, let's have a meeting on the hydraulics.
Yeah. All right, cool. That makes sense. Okay, so team.
There are 3 elements of team. Number one is systematically recruiting the best people. Systematically is very important because, as you know, Adam, a lot of times people recruit willy-nilly and they get the wrong people.
So can you define systematic a little bit more? I mean, like, systematic makes sense in theory, but like, what does it mean from actually recruiting in a systematic way?
Well, this is perfect because you're an optimizer. Do you have a document that lays out every single step in your recruiting process?
We do.
Yeah. So systematic, you're Mr. Systematic, right? So for those listening, do what Adam would do. But yeah, most companies, they don't have a recruiting process, or they
just add to brag on ourselves for a second. We not only have a step process of all the things we do in our recruiting process, in the interview process, every single person who's in that process. So we interviewer 1, 2, 3, 4 is what we usually do. We have a 5th in case we need a tiebreaker. Each one of those people has very specific questions they ask.
Yes.
In each one of those steps. So if someone else jumps into that step, they have a set list of questions they're supposed to ask. They have a set list of ways they're supposed to grade that person. And then we fill in the grade as well. And we then do a sub. We add them all up and average it out to see what the average score is for that person, whether they move forward.
Perfect. Great example. So very systematic. The best book on this topic is Who.
Great book. Great.
Yes. And so if you haven't read the book Who, go read it. It's very short. And you can literally take their process and put it step by step into a spreadsheet or into Asana or Linear or Notion, whatever you want to do. And it's repeatable. So every time you recruit, you're repeating this process. So that's systematic recruiting. That's the first part of team. The second is you need to develop your team. You need to invest in them so that they become more effective and more productive. And the third is you need to create a culture where they thrive and they stay.
Walk me through the culture part. I mean, this is a personal pet peeve of mine. Like, I think we have relatively good longevity with the team, but it's very difficult, I find. And we're fully remote, to be clear. How do you help build a culture that can be one that thrives? Like that culture is always a little squishy to me, and people talk about having great culture, but what does that really mean to you, or how do you help build or cultivate a great culture?
So at the end of the day, culture is just the relationship between people, right? So that's where you really want to focus. People get really confused around culture. Do I need to have a ping pong table? How many vacation days do I need to have? And especially in Silicon Valley, I mean, Adam, you and I lived there when it got out of control, and Google was saying we're going to feed you and do your laundry and send an Uber to you and all this.
Seeing back to that right now, people are getting the NBA star $100 million offers and stuff. So it's probably getting back that level.
It is. It is. I mean, we're at the new phase of froth, right? But I actually think that's less about culture, and there's a lot of cultural liabilities when you start saying, hey, this guy's making $100 million and you're making $100,000. But I want you to work just as hard or harder. So that's a whole interesting cultural discussion. But you asked, how do you cultivate a great culture? And I said, it really depends on how people interact. And so you want them to, number one, be clear, as we discussed earlier. Number two, the handoffs have to be easy to perform. Meaning, let's say I'm a designer and you're a developer, you do front-end developing, and I'm a designer. What does that handoff look between you and me? So I do A, you do B. Is that a seamless handoff? There's a lot of friction there. It's like, hey, I thought so-and-so was going to do this, or I thought you were going to do this yesterday, or, I thought you were going to do an A+ work and you gave me a B- work. So sometimes we overlook these handoffs between different people.
Okay.
And one other thing that's important is when you think of employee motivation and retention, it's not necessarily tied to finances and perks. So the worst way to motivate people and the worst cultures are focused on blame and shame.
Yeah.
You did a horrible job. You're not good enough. You're showing up too late. That motivates actually, but it motivates for a very short amount of time. And then you have a toxic culture. The second worst is actually one that's really focused on money, because the bribery doesn't last very long. Anyone who's gotten a raise knows you feel great for about 2 weeks and your baseline resets and you're like, I want more money.
Yeah, totally. You're like, I'm still not paid enough. This is unfair.
Yes. So what motivates employees? Well, it's a few things. Number one is, are they getting in their zone of genius? Are they doing the thing that feels effortless, even though it's very productive? Number two, are they learning and growing? And number three, do they feel loved and respected? And a great culture combines those three things. But it's not just personal, it's interpersonal. It's not, am I Mike feeling like I'm in my zone of genius? It's like, am I playing on the Chicago Bulls and the way that Jordan passes me the ball, it feels effortless, right?
Yeah.
That's a great culture. And so that's what a CEO has to cultivate.
And are there ways that a CEO can work to cultivate that? Is there a certain, every CEO is going to be different and your personality is different as a CEO. Are there things that every CEO should try to do to cultivate that? There's a lot of things you just said to get right. We still haven't even gone into resources, right? We're talking about vision. Within vision, there's a number of things. Within team, there's a number of steps. How do you become a CEO who's great at those things? That's a lot to get done and do right.
Yeah, well, let's chunk them down. The three key items that I talked about with motivation. So the first is zone of genius. You have the right people in the right seat. That's like a table stakes thing that's actually quite difficult. Most people breeze over it. I need a designer. I'm hiring a designer. That person should design. Well, design doesn't mean the same thing to all people.
Yeah.
To some people, it's 80% research. To other people, it's moving pixels around a screen. So you have to really understand, are people actually being self-actualized? Are they doing the thing that they're best at, that gives them joy, that gives them energy, but feels effortless? So, if you do that, you just did the 80-20, because most people aren't in that position.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite interesting because a lot of the things that we find frustrating, someone else finds invigorating. So it's a little bit of just moving the pieces around the chessboard to find out, creating almost a harmony among the team. Hey, Mike's doing that thing that's really slowing him down, but Adam's great at it. So let's talk to Adam and see if he's willing to take it. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm doing this thing I don't want to do. Can someone else do it, right? So there's a little bit of an audit of what are all the employees doing and how do we get them more in their zone of genius. And I'm not talking about some false, fantastic, euphoric, we come to work and we're sitting in the clouds. No, of course, we have to do some work that we don't love. But a lot of the time that we feel like we're in our zone of genius. That's the first thing. Second thing is when we go into learning and development, I actually find this be the easiest, but maybe that's because I love to learn and teach, which is, as a manager, are you clear on what each of your direct reports is learning and growing in? And I actually like to define this and usually do it over 6-month periods. And so I create personal development goals. And these might be, some people want to become better at public speaking. They want to be better at time management. They want to be better at managing people. Whatever it is, as a manager, you just set your employee on that goal that they define and you give them a little coaching. Once a month you check in and say, hey, I know you want to become better at public speaking. I've noticed you're not really speaking up. What's going on? How can I support you? So that's learning and development. And the third is just being loved and respected. It's treating people with dignity and actually caring in them and believing them. When someone does not feel like they're believed in, it's like taking a balloon and pulling all the air out of it.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you feel like that about your direct report, you have an obligation to exit that person from the company.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm working for you and I'm a salesperson and you just don't believe I'm going to close any deals, and I'm like, man, my boss doesn't believe in me anymore, I'm not going to close many deals.
That's a psychological thing that I think they've studied even in schools, right? If you have a teacher who believes in you, you will do better, irrespective of how good the teacher is in every other single way, right? So you will do better as a student if you just have a teacher who believes that you can do great and you have that confidence. Actually, and by the way, I love your point about kind of learning in personal development. It's something I just did my direct report one-on-ones yesterday, actually. We usually do it at the beginning of the month, but later because I was out last week. And I want to maybe add that back in about kind of how are they learning and growing. I think it's a really good point.
Yeah. I do want to add one comment related to culture, which is you're asking more about CEO excellence. Like what can a CEO control?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are companies that are a total mess and they're still successful, right?
Despite that. Okay. What are examples of those for public ones that might be?
Well, so Don Valentine, one of the most famous investors in Silicon Valley, said, I want to invest in the companies that do everything wrong and are still successful.
Yeah. Because then you can go fix that and then it becomes even more successful at some point.
When you have product market fit and so much product pull, it's going to be great. Now, OpenAI right now or Anthropic, if they had a crappy culture, I think they'd still be fine.
Yep. Totally agree. I mean, arguably, OpenAI has a terrible crappy culture. I mean, like they got rid of their CEO for a week and the board threw him out and their entire founding team is left. And yet they're supposedly going to go raise like a $500 billion valuation.
There's so much market pull.
Yeah.
So I say that because sometimes we get a little too fluffy about these things and we try and paint this perfect picture of a company and it can be distracting. Sometimes you just need to sell. Mm-hmm. Like revenue does solve a lot of problems, right? So I just want to give that caveat for any founders or CEOs that are hearing this, that it's a lot, right? And this is a long journey. That's why it's helpful to get support externally because you're not going to wake up tomorrow and solve all of these problems. But it is important for a CEO to focus on vision, team, and resources. And we all neglect certain areas. Like I mentioned with vision, most people neglect confirmation, confirming that other people see the same thing they see. And in team, usually leaders will neglect one of those three areas, either recruiting, developing their people, or building a culture. And over time, you do need to address those areas.
Yep. And then what about resource? Just to go over that quickly too. What does that mean?
Yeah. So in resources, there are three areas. The first is basic closing deals. So getting the resources the company needs. That could be raising money. It could be closing big sales deals or partnerships. The second is having decision-making frameworks in place to know how to allocate the resources. A lot of times as CEOs, we don't have decision-making frameworks in place. We shoot from the hip, or we decide out of FOMO, mm-hmm. or we do what our investor tells us to do. It's not prudent. And so we actually need to institute frameworks so that we can make the right decisions. And the last is managing your own personal energy, because that's one of the most valuable resources, especially at the early stage. If you're the founder CEO, you need to manage your energy. You can't get burnt out. You need to show up solid and grounded. And so those three things make up how a CEO can manage resources.
Yeah, no, that's so great. So, and I agree with that. I mean, actually, I've done a number of videos on like my own personal journey to make sure I'm showing up every day at my highest level for my team's sake, and the company's sake. So changing topics a little bit, but not obviously massively. Walk us through your own journey, right? So you're a 3-time founder. What are the companies you founded? Obviously, want to dig into Soma and some of the lessons you've learned there. Why did you become an entrepreneur in the first place?
I have an interesting story because I never had a real job.
Okay.
I didn't get a degree in business. I studied theology and I actually thought I was going to become a Catholic priest. And so I went to school, got really into my faith. And
you were basically Yale, right? Like
I went to Boston College undergrad and Yale grad. And I actually got accepted to Yale early for graduate school, but I deferred for a year. So I took a year off and did all sorts of adventures. And I went back to graduate school and I was studying and I found it intellectually stimulating, but sitting around and reading books and writing papers all day was not the gift that I was given. Mm-hmm. And during that time, I started a company called Sparkseed, which is essentially an accelerator for social entrepreneurs. So think Y Combinator for young people that want to start do-gooder companies.
Why did you even think that was necessary? As you're sort of the student, essentially almost in grad school. Why did you think that was a necessary requirement?
I'm the type of person that when I want to do something, I just do it.
Cool. Love that.
And so when I get an itch, I scratch it. And in this case, it was like, this should exist in the world. I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. Which maybe I can leapfrog to my second company.
Yeah.
So after my first one, I worked out.
The first one failed. You raised money. What end?
It was like a little acquisition. Okay. It was basically, I would call it a failure or maybe a single.
Okay.
But I wouldn't call it a success. So ran that. It was a little plateaued. Someone wanted to take it. They got it. I worked out a startup. Amazing experience. But the interesting thing about being impulsive about starting companies is I remember I was at lunch and a friend of mine and I were talking about the next company I want to start. And we came up with the idea, and I decided in that lunch I was quitting my job.
Wow.
I had no money. I had nothing really, but I just was like, yeah, let's do it. So, started the second company, which ended up being Soma. Soma began as a direct-to-consumer water filter company.
Basic competitor to Brita, right?
Exactly. Think Brita water filters, which about 20% of houses have water filter pitchers. And these are, cheap plastic water filters that you forget to change the filter and it looks ugly and all that type of stuff. So we designed a beautiful water filter. The filter came on subscription, so you wouldn't forget to change it, which was great for our business model.
Yeah.
And then all these other benefits. It was sustainable and charitable and millennial cool and all that type of stuff.
And okay, so Soma, and you ran Soma for like 7 years before it got acquired. Is that right?
Yeah, a little shorter than that, but yeah, I ran it, and I think a year and a half was just developing the product and pre-marketing it, and then we launched. We raised like $10 million. We launched the company, had a pretty hot start, and then for me as a young founder, I made all the mistakes.
How old were you? How old were you this time?
I started the company when I was 28 years old.
Okay, so yeah, you're in your 20s still.
Yeah, and the first one wasn't venture backed. It was a totally different game. So this one, I've got this high powered board, amazing investors. We get this hot start, so there's all of this pressure. We spend way too much money. We hire too many people. All the classic mistakes.
Yeah, it sounds like a company I invested in that. All the things, like crushed it and then totally died and failed. You did not have that happen, but I know you're talking about.
But almost died and failed, and that's why I hired an executive coach when I was early in that company. He helped me turn things around. But it was really, really a painful journey. I had to fire a lot of people. We had to tighten our belts, had to raise money. I had to raise money at a time where subscription commerce had a real black eye because there were all of these companies like Shoe Dazzle that were hot and failed.
Yep.
And it was great. School of Hard Knocks, I learned a ton. But what was cool about that journey was through my coach, I was learning so much around leadership and culture and execution. And I started advising other companies, and I essentially started coaching them.
Yeah.
And so that was the real start of my coaching career.
What was the impetus to get a coach? Did your board say you need to get a coach? How did you, as a sort of second time, but sort of still early founder, decide, a coach is a good thing for me to go get even do? Because a lot of people, I've come across a lot of founders. Look, a lot of founders need to have a strong ego to be a founder, right? You need to actually believe you can go create something that has never existed in the world. So you have to have a pretty strong ego and belief in yourself. Getting a coach is a little humbling. It means you don't have all the answers. And now you're willing to pay a lot of money for this person who's going to give you, by a dollar perspective, very little of their time for a lot of money. How did you come to the conclusion, be okay with the fact that you should get a coach?
Well, in my case, my back was against the wall.
Okay. So it was like you're going to get fired or get a coach and figure this out?
I wasn't that I was going to be fired, or at least not that I knew of, but I knew the company was headed in the wrong direction and we needed a hard pivot. By hard pivot, I mean we need to stop spending so much money. We need to get the right team. We need to ensure we have product market fit, not just beginner's luck.
Yep.
We need to get our COGS in order. We need to get our supply chain in order. And I think all of us just want a sounding board. We want someone to talk to. And what's cool about a coach is it's not an investor who could fire you like a board member. It's not a teammate that you need to keep motivated. It's not a family or friend who doesn't understand your business. I could go talk to someone I grew up with. They don't understand venture-backed startups, right? So it's someone who intricately understands your experience. They've seen the movie many times before, and they have confidentiality, so they can't tell anything what you discussed. And they really love you. They care for you and they want to see you succeed. That's their only goal, is to see you succeed. And so I hired a coach who I had known, because back then, and this is probably around 2013, everything was in person in Silicon Valley, right? Silicon Valley was still a geographic place. It wasn't a thesis.
Idea.
And so there were a handful of coaches, and I knew probably most or all of them socially. But I was always skeptical, because coaches are so expensive on an hourly rate. But if they make one change, then they paid for themselves for many years.
Absolutely.
Right. In that case, and I've helped founders, unfortunately, go through this because it's very difficult, but firings will save a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
When you are in a place where you have dead weight, and you might have $500,000 or more of dead weight, a coach in one session can help you in a very humane way let those people exit the company.
Yeah.
You just got a lot more runway, right? So there are certain things coaches can do. They can help you raise millions or tens of millions of dollars. They can extend your runway so you don't go out of business. They can help you divorce a co-founder if you need to do that. They can help you replace a board member. They can help you close a deal that's worth 6 or 7 figures. So the best coaches, like the top 1%, are very expensive, but their leverage, the ROI is, 10, 20, 50x higher than you're going to pay them.
How do you go about finding, so you met your coach in person because you knew him, but like nowadays, how does someone go about identifying, if they recognize they need a coach, how do you go about identifying the best coach and the right coach? And should you always sort of pay up for a coach? So, and I'll use this a basic example. So my former co-founder and I, we had a coach for a while who was amazing, but we interviewed a few different coaches. And one coach was about 50% lower cost than the coach we eventually ended up choosing. And I found it really hard to choose the more expensive coach because I'm like, I don't know what the difference is. They both seem fantastic. They both have great references. I enjoy talking with both of them. Does paying more actually get you more? And I'm still not actually totally sure about that. I'm actually now good friends with that coach, so I'm glad we chose him because he's wonderful. But I don't know. So like, how do you go about choosing the right coach? Since the only way to really figure it out is do you have a good rapport and what's the price? But price is always indicative of quality.
So the best way to choose a coach is to talk to other founders who have coaches and then try before you buy, right? Like, on the first call, hopefully you're getting some coaching. And if not, you can request a free coaching call with the coach because you really want to experience coaching. Coaching cannot be understood intellectually. It must be experience. And if you spend an hour or 90 minutes with a coach and they haven't delivered tens of thousands of dollars in value, they probably aren't going to do so in the future.
Is there a world where you think AI replaces coaching?
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Yes. I in many ways, it already has, in the sense that I use AI to coach me, meaning just give me advice.
Yeah.
Now, it is not currently at the level of an elite coach, but it could get there pretty quickly, right? I use AI to enhance my coaching session. So I have 2 more coaching sessions today after this recording, and I've already been spending hours on ChatGPT and others going through our notes and our recordings and basically creating a game plan to ensure that we get the most value out of our sessions.
That's cool. And I assume, by the way, founders could be doing some of that themselves, right? Thinking through like, hey, I need to improve the culture of my team. How do I go about doing that and talking through it? Yeah. You said to ask the question.
They should. I would say right now, based off of my experience using a lot of these platforms, I wouldn't say purely superficial, but it doesn't go that deep.
Okay.
And it's kind of like a quick gut check. Like, I'm not going to spend 90 minutes talking to ChatGPT Advanced Voice. I might spend 5 minutes, or I might spend 30 minutes uploading a bunch of documents and getting feedback or saying, hey, ask me 10 questions to give me clarity on this. But you're probably not going to spend 90 minutes like you would with a coach. And I have never had an emotional experience with AI.
Yes.
Meaning when I had my, I have a client that we had one session, our first session, and he said, this is more valuable than 8 years of therapy.
Wow.
Because we went really deep. And I don't think the models can do that yet. Maybe they will in the future. But I think that AI is an amazing supplement to real life coaching. And for some people, especially if you don't have the budget, maybe you could get 20% of the value for 1% of the cost just by using AI. But if you're a venture-backed founder and like you're trying to do something that's worth hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, you should probably invest tens of thousands into a coach that's going to de-risk that. You don't want to look back and say, wow, we missed that $1 billion exit, but thank God we saved $100,000.
This is the pet peeve of mine in general, because I tell founders, of course, all the time this exact same thesis when it comes to back office operations, right? That's obviously what Chore does, is sort of like, if we save you 20 to 30 hours this month, and every single month compounding over the next year in time saved, and yes, we cost money, but we do that work, and you as a founder can go focus on spending time with your coach or getting that next sale. We pay for ourselves many times over. And so it's all about, maybe going back to where we started in some ways, it's about where you spend your time and where you want to focus and optimize and what is the most important thing. But coaching wise, yes, it can be a massive difference and game changer.
And it goes back to what I said around decision-making with resource allocation. A great CEO is a resource allocator.
Yep.
Right. So that's the main thing is you have to be willing to figure out how to get the most ROI out of all of your investments. The software you buy, the external contractors, the employees, whatever it may be. And some founders have a lot of scarcity and they think about price over value.
Yep.
And, Warren Buffett, that's his rule of thumb, right? You've got to be an allocator. A great CEO is a great allocator. And so that's part of a coach too, is helping our clients understand allocation. And in some cases, it doesn't make sense. I've worked with fancy consultants that were a total waste of time. They give you a deck and you're like, that's it. And I've worked with coaches and consultants that it was probably one of the best investments I ever made.
Was there any way to know beforehand? Any lessons you learned beforehand so you can avoid the ones who are bad and only work with the people who are worth the ROI?
Well, since I work in the venture-backed CEO community, it's a pretty tight-knit community. Founders talk, and a founder recommendation is worth a lot. If you and the community of elite coaches is pretty small. So, you could ask, hey, has anyone worked with this coach? And get a few responses. And if you have any red flags, I would probably strike them from the list. If you're getting mostly green lights, then I would proceed with a call. And like I said, try before you buy. Like, for example, with me, I don't have terms for my clients. My clients stay with me for a very long time, but I don't lock them into a contract. Hey, you have to coach with me for 12 months or something like that. So there's actually little risk in hiring a top coach because it's like, hey, let me just work with this person for a month, see how it goes. Worst case scenario, I learn a little and I spend some money, but best case scenario, it helps transform my business. And for a lot of founders, they're in positions like me where they feel like their back is against the wall. There is something keeping them up at night. There's something broken. They need to get that fixed. And what's amazing is oftentimes when you unplug the fire hose, the water shoots out, right? And you just have to have someone who, like a surgeon, can cut it out, as opposed to beating your head against the wall. Or a trap could be with AI. I'm going to ask ChatGPT how to solve this critical issue in my business because I want to save a little money, and you never do it. That's like a kiss of death. Yeah. So again, you got to be really prudent about with whom you work, and sometimes just, go in. Like in my case, I called him. I said, hey, I finally am ready for coaching. Can we get a session on the books next week? He told me the price. I said, let's do it. And I worked with that coach for a long time. It was very helpful.
That's awesome. Going back to your point about allocation, do you mind if I maybe use a different word and tell me if this is accurate? Allocation, the way you kind of were describing it, it sounds a lot like investment. And to me, investment is a critical thesis and way to think about everything you do, a critical lens. I don't know if this is, tell me if this is accurate, but I think a lot of things, not about allocation, I think more about what's the right investment and where should I be investing over the long term or the short term, and how do I make those investments? And the reason I think I like to think about that is because that helps me make decisions about, okay, is this a good investment, let's say, of my time? Or am I wasting my time by spending it in other different ways? And is that the right lens, or is allocation? I mean, you use the term allocation. I don't want to change that, but like I kind of do. Like, I don't know. To me, once again, investment is matter of, investment helps me think about the long term versus allocation. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you $1,000 and you $10,000, and now go do your job. But
absolutely, yeah, we're saying the same thing with different words.
Okay, cool. So let's spend a bit more time. Let's actually go into optimization. I want to come back to Soma Water because we didn't quite finish that. But like, let's talk about optimization since we sort of kicked it off there. You and I both are optimizers. How should founders think about optimization on every part of their business, including themselves as an individual? Right? You can only optimize so much. So how do you figure out what to optimize, where to optimize, and where to put in that time?
Sure. I'll paint a picture for you that might be helpful. When I was in college, my sophomore year, there were 9 of us living in one dorm, right? Nine young men in one, a suite. It was like an apartment, but
I'm still a pretty big one. I mean, I had my senior year, we had one that had, I guess it was 6 of us, and that felt like a pretty big suite.
Yeah. So imagine 9 guys living in a 3-bedroom suite, college age, and one of them never studied. And I was a total nerd in college. I love studying. I was always in the library. I just thought this is the greatest opportunity ever to read Plato and Aristotle and all these incredible books. But so I had a roommate who never studied. He always outperformed me. He shouldn't study more. He should just use his natural gifts to do what he's good at. And also he was a kind of a crammer, right? I was like slow and steady. I'm just going to spend a ton of hours setting. He was like, no, I'll do a few hours before the exam. I tell this story because different people have different gifts, and most companies should have an optimizer. It doesn't have to be the CEO. Also, most companies that are successful, they have someone who's internal and external. What I mean by this is internal is more of like a COO or a president or a general manager who's running the business. You're usually more organized. Ideally, they're a good people manager. And you have someone external, the creative visionary, the person who does the speeches and the fundraising and closing big deals and recruiting and PR. And so you have to know what your gifts are. Like I said, some founder CEOs, they don't need to optimize, but maybe their chief of staff or their EA or their head of operations will do it for them. Others, like you and me, we're natural optimizers. We're always going to look for the most efficient route. And if that's your gift, you probably should lean into it. You just have to be aware of over-optimizing, which ends up being a waste of time.
Well, that's my worry, right? Is that it's too easy to over-optimize sometimes and to focus on. So like right now, as an example, where I'm considering making a pretty big change in our business, and it would incur a very large fee. Like it's like a big per seat license for every single person as a license to the software. But it might really change our business and what it means. I struggle with it a little bit because it feels like, okay, do I pay way more for this new seat license? But what is the ROI there? It's difficult for me to think through that, because in some ways I want to optimize. Like I want to be super efficient and therefore super like high margin. But how do I decide that I'm going to spend this money instead? And that leads to a bigger investment optimization long term.
Great. So let me give you a framework that you could use, because we talked about a CEO should focus on resource allocation and they need decision-making frameworks to do that. And this is just a quick one that anyone can use when making decisions. Now, if we had 90 minutes, we could really drill down and get the best decision. But the key thing is that for each person when they make a decision, there are three primary centers of intelligence.
Okay.
The first is our brain, which is logical and rational. The second is our heart, which is emotional. And the third is our gut, which is instinctual. I have a gut feeling, right?
Yep.
And almost all of us are good at one and not so good at the other. Yep. For me, I'm very logical. You're probably the same way. You're right. Spreadsheets, analysis, data, black and white,
Yes.
Formulas, right? And that's awesome. But I'm not so emotional, and my instinctual talents could be improved.
Yep.
Now, my wife, on the other hand, is very instinctual. She gets a gut feeling she's right about it. And so when making decisions, it's important to check in on these three areas, or even supplement our decision-making with other people. Like in my household, I often ask my wife for a gut check. It could be about something she doesn't even know about in my business or in the tech world. Just say, hey, does this feel right? No, it doesn't feel right. Something's off. Amazing. I didn't feel anything was off, but she can feel it.
Yeah.
Other people emotionally, they're really tapped in. They can say, this makes me feel frustrated or nervous or anxious, right? And so when making these decisions, I would wager to say, Adam, you've probably really thought logically about this. What's the cost? What's the ROI? How do we implement it? What's the switching cost, et cetera? But you could probably check in with yourself or others on just instinctually, is this the right time?
Yeah.
Or emotionally, like what's going on emotionally? And our emotions are great guides that teach us things. They tell us different directions. Different emotions tell you, watch out for certain things or set boundaries. And so I would recommend, if I were coaching you as a founder and we had more time, I would go through all three of those and we would map out each of those, and then maybe do some homework and go ask other people with different gifts. And then when we make that decision, we know we're making it in the most thorough and prudent way.
Yeah, no, actually, I almost want to create like a ChatGPT project and sort of have those three as part of it and say, okay, how do these three fit? Here's my decision. Here's my question. What do I think through here? But even as you're talking through that, I'm sort of thinking, okay, look, the brain would say this is expensive, but the gut check is like, this is almost certainly the right decision, because that investment, if it enables what we expect it to enable, will so outweigh the per seat license costs. It's almost an irrelevant cost. It's sort of silly to even consider it.
Great. Okay. So now there's the third one, which is emotion. So let's imagine you're signing the DocuSign, or you're even better, you're wiring the money.
Yeah.
From your bank account. And it's like you're clicking send of this large amount of money and you're sending it off to the software provider. What's the sensation or emotion you feel? Like, can you feel anything in your body, in your stomach, chest, or next?
Yeah, actually, at a high level, I mostly feel excitement because when I get to the decision, where I get to the point where I make a decision like that, I've decided that that is going to enable us to grow and get bigger and be more successful. And that's my goal, is to build a game-changing company with Chore, where we are going to enable every single company in the world to run their operations in a world-class way. And therefore, I want to make those investments, right? So if I'm not here to just hoard all the money and pay myself a big bonus or something at the end of the year, that's not my goal. Therefore, I'm willing to make those investments. And if it doesn't work out, like that would be painful. That'd be painful to lose that money. But I view it as an investment that, like, I'm making a bet, and I've thought through it as logically as I can. And therefore, it's a bet we're going to go for.
Okay,
I
great.
really feel that way when I make a decision.
Perfect. So if you were to go back and rewatch this video, when I asked you about the emotion, you start with excitement, and I could hear in your voice you were excited. But then you came down to what I would call neutrality. And the best state in which to make a decision is a neutral state. It's not excited. I get excited.
I get really emotional. I'll be like, let's go this direction today because I read some great article. And
absolutely,
you get shiny object syndrome, SOS.
Exactly. But you also don't want to be fearful. That's a bad place. So you want to get neutral. And I saw you at or approaching neutrality when you started talking about it. And that's very important for us. When I mentioned, the head, the heart, and the gut, the heart is to identify what are the emotions that I'm feeling, and what can I learn from them. And then secondly is, how do I get to an emotionally neutral state? This doesn't mean numb. It just means like grounded and strong, sturdy, lest the wind's going to blow me over.
Yep.
And when you get to that place, you're usually in a clear-headed spot. Now, you may want to go talk to other people and just say, hey, I'm pretty sure I'm going to make this decision, poke some holes in it. But it's very important on the emotional side that we're not making negative or positive emotions make the decision for us.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And too many people to get emotionally swayed by those things. How do you make sure as a founder to not over optimize and spend too much time? So we can keep using this example for my company. I thought about it. We've done some research. We've looked at all different options. We feel pretty strong this is the right direction to go. And now it's like, I kind of want to just move fast and go with it and not over optimize. Like, let's find the best possible deal, or let's make sure tool A versus tool B versus tool C, like all three are going to be decent. Let's go with the one we think is the best and just make a decision. Like, how do you decide when to go do that or not? So maybe I'll give you another example. Like, we ClickUp versus Asana versus, Monday.com, right? They're all kind of the same. We kind of made a decision, and I, in the end, as CEO, just made a choice between the one we want to use. I made it based on the lowest cost one, but also the one that I thought was most interesting, but they all seem kind of the same. Like, how do you decide when to over optimize or under optimize, or just make a decision that's like, as a founder, it's like, I'm just going to go?
Yeah. Well, in the last case that you just gave between those different software systems, I don't think there's a lot of liability. They're not going to make or break the company, and those ones aren't super expensive anyways. So that I would lean more towards a quick decision. The way you framed up the question, it seemed like you wanted to become more decisive or move faster because you're aware of a risk of overanalyzing or over-optimizing. But there are some people who maybe they're more risky and they need to slow down and do more research. The question I would have for you, though, is in your company, who's the number one best decision maker?
I mean, it depends, I suppose, on in the area of expertise that they're trying to make a decision on.
That's fair. But if you just said generally, like let's say you're picking out a sports team and you looked at everyone on the field, you could probably tell me who the best wide receiver was.
Sure.
And similarly, in a company, there's usually a best decision maker. It's not always someone in the C-suite. But is there someone that comes to mind? And it could be yourself.
I mean, I was going to say myself. I don't love giving that answer, but yeah, it's probably myself.
Okay, fantastic. The reason why I say that is a lot of times CEOs believe they need to be the chief decision maker, but that's not always their gifts. Sometimes it is, sometimes there isn't. But there's often someone who's very good at making decisions. It could be their executive assistant. It's not title specific, but some people have the gift of decision making and bringing them in to help you make the decision or narrow down the list. They don't have to actually make the final decision, but they can be a really good collaborator. And just literally identify and bring that person in is very helpful. Most of us don't take the time to find out who the best decision maker is in the company. You can test this over time. You could do personality tests. I really like the Working Genius assessment by Patrick Lencioni. And But there are many ways to identify this, but simply getting that person is a shortcut to better decisions.
And so you'd almost say like bring that person in, be like, hey, here's our options. Here's where we want to make a decision. Take a sort of semi-neutral perspective and like, let us know what you think.
Yeah. Or you could have them do the research if that's part of their gifts. Like for me, I don't like doing a lot of research. I'm a quick decision maker, for better or worse. And so I might want to say, hey, I'm not going to spend time doing all this research. I don't want to talk to a bunch of salespeople. I want you to spend 8 hours. Go do whatever you think is best to discern the best decision. Give me your recommendation and I'll make the final decision.
Okay, cool. I like that. It's very usable. How does that end up with like a founder? So how does that work with a founder? Maybe you can go back to your Soma Water days for a second. And it comes to like growth of you as a founder from the early days when it's you and just a few people to 10 people to 20 people, 50 people, 100 people. How does your role as a founder change and how should you enable yourself either moving in and out of different roles as the company grows?
Well, one of the things I tell my clients when we start working together is if you're not reinventing yourself every 6 months, you're either going to become the bottleneck of the company or you might be looking for a new job. Because you're either going to slow the company down, which is not acceptable, or the company is going to outgrow you.
Yeah.
Not good.
How does a founder know when that's happening? Once again, I feel like a lot of founders don't have the self-awareness to understand that.
Well, that's where a coach would be helpful, or at least a very helpful advisor, board member, or employees. You should be getting employee feedback. That's also something that's underutilized. You should be constantly asking employees, hey, what's something that you're liking or wish were different about me? And same for the company, right? So your employees have intense knowledge and they're seeing things you don't see as a leader, and you have to be asking them for feedback. So that's key. But there are other ways for you to see those blind spots. But in general, you want to be able to see the enhanced version of yourself that's 6 to 12 months ahead of you.
Yep.
So the question you want to be asking yourself as a leader is, who do I need to become 9 months from now to push the company forward? And it's going to be different for each person, but there are, of course, general kind of rules, right? Early days as a founder, you're doing everything. And then usually around Series A, Series B, you're building your executive team. And there's a point at which the productivity you can create, even if you're a 10Xer, is lesser than the productivity the team will create.
Yep.
And that's a chasm that's very hard to cross because you have to let go of being the star. You have to find out what you're great at. And you need to switch into a managerial role or at least a leadership role.
Yeah.
And if you've never been there, it's scary. And it's a lot more comfortable and safe and familiar to just be the person at the keyboard.
Yeah, no, 100%.
But that's not what you're called to do.
Yeah, no, I know for myself, I try really hard not to be that person. Although once again, with this specific change, I decided just to dive in because no one else could do it. And I was like, I'm just gonna go figure this out. So going back really quickly to Soma Water, what ended up happening? You get this coach, the company turns around, you end up getting an exit. Like, how did you fix things? How do you right the ship? What did that look like?
We started as a direct-to-consumer subscription business. So it was all online marketing. You would buy the Soma Water filter pitcher, and then you would get filters every other month. Beautiful business. We, though, needed to grow the business, both in terms of product and distribution. So we ended up moving from a water filtration company to what I would call a hydration company. And the hydration company meant that we sold anything related to water products, water filters, water bottles, coffee products, tea products. And then with that expansion, we also needed greater distribution. So we started selling into major retailers, which for me was a huge learning curve and a great blessing because it was an amazing experience and education. But we were in over 5,000 Starbucks stores, all 2,000 Target stores, over 1,000 Bed Bath stores when Bed Bath exists. I don't know if they're still around.
Yeah, I think they're
RIP.
now. Yep.
Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's, 1,000 independent stores around the world. So we went on a heavy distribution push. And then like many companies, we got to a place where we said, okay, we need to raise another round. And are we going to raise a round or are we going to be sold? And we had an offer come in to buy us. Now that first offer was pretty bad, but I leveraged it to get 2 more offers and obviously accepted the best one. And so we sold the company in 2017 and I stuck around with the acquirer for about 18 months to help with that transition. And then during that time, I started also, thinking about what was next. And that included a few things like investing, but primarily it was to get into my passion, which is coaching founders.
And did you find that was that acquisition process pretty good? Did you feel good about the exit for yourself, for your team? What did that look like? Why not continue to raise versus why did you say, okay, exit instead of raise?
Sure. So, well, first off, this goes back to the earlier question around values and excellence. What does it look like for you?
Mm-hmm.
One of my values is freedom. I love being free. I love waking up and being able to do whatever I want. Now, when you're a founder, you feel very free at the beginning because you're the CEO, it's your company. But over time, through dilution, through more board members, et cetera, you don't have that level of freedom, right? The business becomes more complex and you've got to do certain things. For us, it might be fly to Asia to see the factory. It might be fly to Minneapolis to sell something new to Target, right? And so for me, I wanted to have a feeling of freedom again. And so that helped inform me personally around that decision on not just the sell, but which acquirer. What are the terms of the deal? Some acquirers wanted to lock me to my desk and keep me there for 4 more years, and others gave me more freedom. So it goes back to values and knowing what is the right thing to do for you. And of course, it goes to math, right? Just looking at the cap table. Hey, what does dilution look like? What is it going to take if we're going to raise 2 more rounds before we exit? How much am I going to own? How long is that going to take, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of decisions being made. I help founders sell companies. I have clients right now that are going through the acquisition process, and it's different for each person. But the key thing is, number one, fiduciary responsibility to your investors. As a founder CEO, you raise money, you have to optimize for your investors. So you have to give them the best deal, whether that's an acquisition, raising more money, or something else. And number 2 is being true to your own values. Because if you're inauthentic to your values, you're not going to perform well.
Yeah, 100%. And so many founders, by the way, I think don't do the math on the money they get today versus I want to have $1 billion company. Okay, but so what if you own, 10% versus you own 25% today and you can sell for a good number? The time value of that money and everything else almost always makes more sense, but people don't do the math. Speaking of briefly, actually, a founder I was hanging out with this past weekend, and speaking of optimization as well, was talking about how he didn't feel like he had any time to work out, get in shape, do all these things because he was so busy with work. And I said to him, I was like, but you're also the founder. You can actually choose where to spend time. You can choose, to your examples, whether you're the person who's going on a trip to see the supplier or someone else is going to do it. What advice would you give to a founder like that who sort of says hey, there's all these things I want to go do. It goes back to your values a bit, but there's things I want to do and I don't have time for them. And whereas I would say as a founder, you are free to make those choices about where to spend that time. And you can, it's kind of what I try to tell them is you can make that decision to where to spend that time. If it's important for you to go work out, find 30 minutes in your day to go work out. Is that the right mindset? He's so focused on his business and he works really hard and he's a good family. He's got a whole family and everything else. But how would you advise him to think through optimizing his day and his life and sort of that freedom that you do get? I think as a founder, you forget that you're CEO. You're the founder and CEO. You can do what you want and make the right choices.
Well, the problem, Adam, is when we're making decisions, we're not making them solely with a pure mind. So forget your actual board of directors. We all have another board of directors, which is psychological. And that board of directors is conflicted because one board member wants to be successful at all costs and they want us to be a grinder.
Mm-hmm.
Another wants us to be a good family person.
Mm-hmm.
Another wants us to be healthy.
Yep.
Another one wants us to pursue our creative interests. And we always have these conflicts, right? Should I go to the gym? No, I need to do these 10 more emails because I want to be successful, So that's where actually coaching can be very helpful, is to take that cacophony of voices out of our head and turn it into a harmonious chorus that we can make clear decisions. Because when you say to your founder friend, it's 30 minutes, dude, go to the gym. Part of him saying, yeah, that's totally right. And part of him is I can't even give 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And we've got to understand that part that's saying, I can't even give 30 minutes. And there's a lot of, imagine a tangled bowl of yarn. That's kind of how we psychologically all are, because we have decades of conditioning and patterns and fears and desires. They're all wrapped up. And if we don't untangle those, then we can't do something as simple as going to the gym for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So there's psychological decision-making is much more complex and profound than we often give it credit for. And that's where someone who has a third-party perspective, who really loves us and is confidential and has no conflicts, can help us to make more prudent decisions.
Could we talk just briefly? And one thing you spend a lot of time talking about, I think publicly, is around sort of like love, patience, humility, right? I think what Ephesians 4:2 and things like that. Like this, I mean, you care about deeply as an individual. How does that impact your life as an individual? And how does that play out for founders, or what advice do you give them? I mean, obviously everyone's life is different, but how do you think through those things, and what advice do you give through that sort of lens?
Yeah. So, I'd say one of the downfalls of Silicon Valley is does not appreciate ancient traditions because it's on the bleeding edge of what's new. We don't even like to think about today. We want to think about the future. I mean, how long have we been talking about the singularity, right? And it's kind of cool. It's still near. Well, he said 2029, so we've got a few more years. It's really cool because a lot of things that you and I saw 10 years ago are going mainstream now.
Yeah.
So that's cool. But there is a disregard or a misunderstanding of ancient traditions, in particular religions. And religions are great because they make us better people generally, and they give us guardrails. For example, for me, I'm Catholic. We pray a prayer, the Lord's Prayer, and every night you have to say, forgive me of my trespass. Forgive me of my trespasses as I will forgive those who have trespassed against me. Every day, multiple times, we say that prayer many times a day. I have to remind myself, I have to forgive other people. I don't want to forgive anyone.
Yeah.
Because then I have to prove, it's admitting I was wrong or they're right or whatever. And so there's a beauty to having some kind of tradition that keeps you doing the things that are good for you in the world, despite your own desires not to do them. And so I found that to be tremendously valuable. I made many decisions in my business life that were just the right thing to do, that weren't optimized for my own pocketbook or my ego. I've made plenty of mistakes as well. But I think that it's very important to have these traditions. Love thy enemy. Who wants to love their enemy? That's a horrible idea. Well, if you do it, it actually makes you and the world better, right? And so for me, it's very important. I'm very devout in my faith. And I encourage all of my clients, regardless of their background, to find something they can root deeply in, something they can surrender in that's bigger than themselves. Because the interesting thing about surrender is actually freeing. When you surrender to something, it actually allows you to be liberated.
Yeah, but it's scary to surrender, right? I mean,
absolutely. It's very scary. And it's counterintuitive.
Yeah. And then how does that work surrender is somewhat, I think, partially about being a parent to some extent too. And, you're a father, a spouse. How did that change your life too? Especially also how you do your life and work and what you do and focus on. I assume when you first started your first company and even Similar, you probably didn't have kids then. So how did that change things for you?
One of my greatest fears was that I'd be an absent father. I thought that was my destiny.
Why was that?
Well, because I love working and I was addicted to work, partly because of like my ego and insecurity. But I really felt like I was just going to be one of those people that was very successful, but a horrible husband and father. And I had some life experiences that gave me some clarity on what really matters. And I think the most important thing in life is love. And your family, your spouse and your children, it's like the epicenter of love for you. And so for me, it's very clear. It's not even a decision that I'm going to put them first. And it fills my cup and I really enjoy it. So I would say, for me, going back to the anecdote I told about my employee who said he loved his family, but he really didn't, I truly do. So it makes things a lot easier. It's my anchor that this is what's most important. And I want to spend time with them. It brings me joy and I want to be a good example to them. And I think also being religious, there are rules that you have to abide by. And so when we think, my wife and I, about decisions in our house, we're often going back to our faith. And then that puts some guardrails on, the language we use and what our kids are exposed to and, the prayer that we have in our house, and we never miss church and all that type of stuff. And so it sets us to a certain standard that we want to keep, not only for ourselves, but to be a good example for our children.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's, certainly one that I felt strongly myself, having kids and how this changed things. And, I work from home and I like my kids to school and a lot of other things that I really think are important, and I'm going to be there for them a lot. Now I made trade-offs, right? We have a fully remote company. I think that's a great way to do things. And of course, from an optimizer perspective, I actually think everything about remote makes complete sense. But there's a lot of arguments that that's wrong. And so I guess I'm living my values and hopefully building a company that can prove this wrong. And at some point, that's just a gut decision to be remote. It aligns with my lifestyle.
Well, it's also very important to ask yourself a question that's confronting and difficult, which is, what's more important, your job or your family? For many people, it's actually their job.
How do they, and that just scares them, you think, when they ask them that solves that question?
Absolutely. That's a shameful thing. You're not supposed to put your job before your family. You're a bad parent, right? And so because that's the understanding, people don't want to be honest. Because until you're honest, you're stuck, right? Now, if you're honest and you find yourself in this position, you're like, no, actually, my job's more important because I'm going to do it for 20 years and one day we're going to be rich and then I can give my kids money or whatever your narrative is. Well, then you can work with it and you get to say, okay, my job is more important than my family. Do I want to change that or make it workable? And for those who want to change it, there's a path. For those who want to make it workable, there's a path that might not be optimized, in my opinion, but you have to be honest with yourself. Most people are dishonest. And it goes back to commitments. Show me how you live your life and I'll tell you your commitments. And if you say your family is most important, but you really almost never see them, I'm guessing they're actually not that important.
Yeah. What is that real commitment? And so finding ways or time to be honest with yourself and think through that. I know it's tough for people. I actually also spent this past weekend with a guy who recently got divorced 2.5 years ago. And he said, it took me almost 2 years of just a ton of work on myself to figure out like what I really wanted and who I really was. And now he's doing great. But it took him a divorce to figure that out in who he was. So Mike, let's go through a few quick sort of questions at the end. Like, is there a book that's changed how you lead or how you coach?
Well, I mentioned for recruiting, Who is a great book. I love that one. For coaching and actually leaders in general, you don't have to be a professional coach, but there's a great book called 15 Commitments of a Conscious Leader.
Okay.
And I would recommend that. It's very tactical. Each chapter has a different commitment and very applicable frameworks. So if someone wants to educate themselves on some of these frameworks that a coach might help them walk through, I would recommend that book. I would say for me, when I was a founder, I only read nonfiction and I was optimizing for something that was productive. And now I love fiction and I love the greats. If a book has endured 500 years and it's still a classic, that means something. So, if you haven't read Moby Dick or War and Peace or some of these classic books, spend 10 minutes before you fall asleep just flipping through them. And I think it's going to be highly valuable.
I totally agree. Although none of those the only book that's endured like 500 years is probably the Bible, basically. But I hear your point. It's a really good one. Is there any misconceptions about coaching that you want to debunk that people might have?
Well, I would say one, that the ROI isn't there. That's probably true actually for many coaches. But if you work with a reputable coach, like someone in Silicon Valley that founders have trusted, the ROI is insane. I mean, literally, I've helped founders raise tens of millions of dollars in deals. I've helped them sell companies. I've helped them break up with their co-founders and get equity back into the pool that's worth millions or tens of millions. I'll give you a quick example of that, by the way. I had a client and they started as a direct-to-consumer business. So they're running a consumer business. They had a proprietary technology. They believed they needed to prove the consumer use case out before they went enterprise, but they knew the enterprise deal was the biggest opportunity. We had a heart-to-heart and we decided that they need to sell the consumer business and focus exclusively on enterprise. That company is now worth billions of dollars. That was a multi-billion-dollar conversation.
Yeah. And do you think, it sounds like they knew they needed to go in that direction. And the reason why you as a coach helped them was essentially saying like, if you know this in your heart, you need to go in this direction, you need to just go do it and not play around, like just make the hard decision and go at it. Is that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's part of it. Now, you said you knew in their hearts, and that's great for our earlier conversation because head, heart, and gut, right? So you have to go through all of those and make sure it checks all of the boxes. But yeah, absolutely. They were probably clear that this was the most important thing, but they had a misbelief on what they need to do to get there. And a lot of times the things that we want we can actually have them now.
Yeah.
But we put a little more complexity than needed to get to them.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, we all put things in our own way to get to that end goal. And it's like, no, you can have whatever you want right now. I actually try to tell myself that on a regular basis where I'm like, I feel really good about where I am because I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. And if I don't want to do it, I can just, I have enough agency in my life now that I can go change it if I want to. And so what's the best advice you've ever received as a founder?
Well, there's a quote. Well, I think one of my favorite founder quotes is, startups don't fail because they do the wrong things. It's because they do the right things in the wrong order.
Yep. But you don't know the order at the time, so it's kind of difficult to get that right.
You got to work with someone to figure out the right sequence of events. Yeah. But there's another quote, it's a little deeper. So one of my favorite quotes right now is, when the present state is appreciated as deeply as the desired state, there ceases to be a problem. What that means is, a lot of times we're so focused on this future state that we want to get to. I want to sell my company because finally I'll feel good. I want to marry this person because finally I'll feel good. But when you actually appreciate where you are today, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you don't have that desiring, that longing, that sense of scarcity or lacking. And so we were just discussing this. It's actually, you can get most of the things you want now. You don't have to wait. You don't have to have all this complexity. But what you want is usually a feeling, a sensation, a sense of meaning. And that's accessible right now.
Yeah.
You don't have to go build a startup and wait 20 years to finally feel good about yourself. You can do it now. And in fact, if you do it now, you are more likely to enjoy the ride and be more successful.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great quote. And I'm certainly very much in agreement with it. What's a ritual you do every day, no matter what? I mean, you mentioned sort of the Lord's Prayer. I don't know if there's other ones like that you do, or is that the one that you always do every day?
Well, the ritual that we do as a family every day is we pray the rosary, which is a prayer that takes about 15 minutes. And it's a collection of many prayers, the Lord's Prayer, Hail Mary, Glory Be. And it's a verbal meditation, right? So you're repeating these words like a mantra over and over. And there have actually been studies that show that when you do these mantra-based meditations and prayers, that you get into a certain state. And that state, even your breathing, is a very peaceful state.
That's cool.
And so we, every night as a family, we, put the lights down, we pray this prayer, and then we put the kids to sleep. And it's very beautiful because you see them relax during that time. And of course, during that time, we're putting our attentions out, our prayers for the world and our loved ones and my clients and all of the people that we care about. So that's a beautiful tradition that we do every night.
I love that. I'm going to try doing, maybe won't quite do that, but like sort of a more meditative gratefulness study with my kids at the end of the night instead of just doing a book. I'm like, all right, jump in bed, let's go.
Perfect. One other recommendation too, a very lightweight ritual that I like for those who are trying to enhance their spirituality, and you can just do this at home, is take 1 minute, close your eyes, and just say, God, what do you want me to know? And what do you want me to do? And what's interesting is that you'll probably get very simple answers. Like, I want you to know that you're loved. What I want you to do is be kind. And if you journal these, you do this once a day, every day for 30 days, and you write your answers down, you will learn a lot about yourself. And that's good coaching too. What do you want me to do? Worry less.
Yeah.
You get a lot of wisdom and you'll feel peaceful. It takes about 60 seconds. You could do it every morning before you start your day. And it's something that's very valuable and easy. And for many people who are craving spirituality, because there are many people who want more spirituality in their life right now, it's a very simple thing that they can do.
I love that. That's great. Very specific advice. What do you do when you're having, I mean, you know, people probably think, okay, Mike seems like he's got his shit super together. What do you do when you're having an off week? Like, who coaches the coach? How do you deal with that?
Well, I do have a coach.
Great.
And he's very expensive, which is good because when my clients say, hey, Mike, you're so expensive, I say, hey, well, I pay the same amount to my coach. Yeah, I have a coach. You know, I have a priest at my church that I go to for spiritual direction. I have a wonderful wife. I have great friends. And I get to talk to founders all the time. It's actually amazing to be a coach because you have scheduled time with brilliant people and you learn a lot from them indirectly. But sometimes I even ask my clients for advice. Hey, I'm going through this tricky time. What would you do?
Yeah.
and they often have really good answers. So I'm very blessed because I have incredible people in my life and I lean on them a lot. But all of these things, prayer, exercise, nature, I feel very grounded. Playing with my children is probably the best medicine. Is this morning, I actually had a 6 a.m. coaching call. I came out of it and my kids basically tackled me and wanted to sit on my lap and do their coloring books. And, there's nothing better than that. So grounding myself in the things that are very, profound and full of love, that's probably the best medicine for me.
Yeah, totally. If there's a single piece of advice, we'll kind of round it all out, right? If there's a single piece of advice that you would try to summarize to give to founders for entrepreneurial excellence, what would that advice be?
Be honest.
Okay.
Be honest about what's working and what's not working. Be honest with people you need to have hard conversations with. Be honest with yourself. What do you really want? Are you really passionate about this? Why are you doing this? Be honest with your investors. This is working. This isn't working. I need more money. You need to be honest. And because we're fearful, we often hold back to our own detriment. And so if we can just increase our honesty, say 10% with ourselves and the people around us, we'll find that we feel much more empowered and that the company is more successful.
I love it. Be honest. Mike, how can people find you if they want to get in touch, if they want to maybe be lucky enough to have you as a coach? How do folks find you?
My website's just mikedelponte.co. And I'm most active on LinkedIn. So if you want to get in touch with me, DM me on LinkedIn or follow me for my content.
Excellent. Mike, really appreciate the time. As we've discussed, time is so precious. Can't get it back. So thank you for spending some of it with me.
Thank you, Adam.